Listening and speaking activities design tips for online and in-person environments. About. In the next slides, we will cover some important tips you can use when creating activities for online or in-person classes, including tips related to content, learning styles, students' proficiency, influence, and motivation. Objectives. Show tips to prepare a speaking or listening activity for online or in-person classes. Discuss the differences between online and in-person environments for listening and speaking activities. List common ideas to motivate students in listening and speaking activities. Listening materials in person. 5 useful tips. Number 1. Use top-down and bottom-up strategies. Top-down and bottom-up are two strategies that are working in separate ways. A top-down strategy allows the student to understand the whole, trying to understand the general meaning of a test, using what the student knows already. And a bottom-up strategy is when the student is adding up what he understands word by word to form sentences and from that get to a conclusion of the whole. Both strategies are necessary and important. Number 2, use multiple skills at the same time. For example, instead of using listening only for listening, you can combine this with other skills to make it more interesting. For example, you can combine it with speaking and have them talk to use speaking and listening. Or you can have redundancy to help with the listening skill. For example, you can have subtitles or a test that they can read, they can verify. You can use also selective listening, or you can make them compare what is written with what is on the audio track. Number 3, the listening type will depend on proficiency. Make sure you use the right proficiency for the students. If it's a new course, maybe you will try to start with simple things. Maybe you will start with selective listening, maybe interactive, and extensive will go later on. Autonomous listening requires high level, so make sure you provide the students with the right kind so you don't affect motivation. Number 4, take advantage of social motivation. Because this is in person, you can take advantage of this. You can have the students talk about what they like. You can have them enjoy and, let's say, gain through the social motivation that they can give each other. Also, number 5, make groups and work with repetitions. When you have repetitions and when you have redundancy, or without redundancy, they can discuss and get to a conclusion together. They can correct each other and they can listen to the repetition to make sure that everything is as intended. Listening materials online. 5 useful tips. Number 1, make sure to have a nonverbal communication standard. When you have a listening online and you have, for example, a Zoom meeting with a lot of students, some of them will try to answer right away as soon as they hear the answer. So make sure that they answer in silent. Maybe they can make a gesture, maybe they can put their hands on their head. Maybe something like yes or no, or true or false would be simple things to say that you can use symbols for. When everybody sees everybody is doing symbols, they will understand something is not right or they're getting the right answer, but they won't interrupt the audio, which is really important. Number 2, groups privacy and two-way communication. This part is related to when you have an online class, it is really important if you have them work in private, if you can let them do their work in private. Some students, they're not comfortable participating with a whole class. So if you have small groups, it helps with that. And they can also take that advantage as when the class is in person. They can take that advantage to work with friends or so and get to the conclusion together. Number 3, have a glossary of important vocabulary. You need to provide the context or have a glossary with important words that they may need on the listening. Maybe you have them prepare this glossary before the listening. Number 4, use authentic materials. You can take the advantage of being online to find authentic material that you can use. Maybe music videos, maybe the news, short clips of movies, and interesting things. and they will be motivated since it is real material, not created for educational purposes. But now this has some problems. In some occasions, you will need to use something that is better fitted to your group. For that, you can use your own voice. That's number 5. If you use your own voice, you can adapt your voice exactly to what your class needs. So you can use your voice to create the exercises, just like I'm doing right now. Speaking materials in person. 5 useful tips. Number 1. Make sure to review linking words and read sentences instead of words. If you help the students understand every time that they're going to speak that they need to link the words and they need to read sentences, whole sentences, instead of reading just word by word, they will work on their fluency. Number 2, make sure that the lower level students starts with fluency. Make sure that they're not afraid to talk. Accuracy will come later, so try to skip some corrections. You don't have to correct everything every time. When the student is getting a higher level, then maybe you can work on accuracy. But at first, fluency is what you need. Number 3, make sure you have a group size that is right. If you have a group that is too big and only 2 students talk at a time, it won't work. You need to have groups that are the right size. For example, if you have a big class, you need to divide it like maybe groups of 3 or 4. The idea is that 2 students talk and another 1 or 2 students review what they talk. They can correct each other, they can learn from each other. That's the idea. Not only 2, but maybe like 3 or 4 will be great. Number 4, make sure you have easy content or maybe a context that was already reviewed in class. This is really important because otherwise the student won't be able to communicate. So you have to make sure that it's not too hard. Now, number 5, write down before speaking. Allow the students to write down what they want to say. For example, prepare. You can set the groups and tell the students, well, we're going to speak about this topic. So prepare your speech. You have 5 minutes. They can write something down or main ideas at least, and then they will talk later on. The students, the teacher can review, visit the groups one by one, and maybe choose some of them to perform in front of the class if they want to. The idea is not to force them, but for them to volunteer. Speaking materials online. 5 useful tips. Number 1, make sure to model the activity for the students. Make sure they can hear you do what they need to do later. That way they can start better. Number 2, make sure that the content that you propose promotes discussion. If you are talking about a topic that doesn't promote discussion, it will run out fast. It needs to be something that they can talk about for a long period of time. Number 3, make sure to do collaborative tasks. You can set up, for example, a task that requires for them to talk on a WhatsApp group. Set up the group, make them, for example, leave short messages and make decisions with the short messages. This is a great activity that you can do so they can communicate, they can solve what they have to solve. It doesn't have to be a complicated task though. The important thing is that they can understand each other, they can hear each other and leave the messages. If you can do a synchronous activity, it's perfect, of course. Number 4, use karaoke to practice fluency. It is a great idea to use karaoke because karaoke will keep the pace of the speech to the music. You can choose the right song and this will help with the pacing, and they will be forced to link the word. They will link the words as intended as we want because the song will do it. Number 5, provide a list of online resources and tools. For example, you can recommend the students to use Google Translate if they want to verify how is the pronunciation of a word, or they can use word reference to check the meaning of a word, or if they want to check the phonetic translation of the word. So different resources are there for them to use. You need to provide that list of resources to them so they can take advantage of being online. Conclusion. We have 4 ideas that are the main conclusions for this. First one is that listening materials are important because the students need to build cognitive maps. This is important because in order to be able to use the language, to code and decode information, this map needs to build. But it doesn't work with speaking. It only works with listening. Listening is what helps that improve according to North. Now, number two, listening materials allow the students to receive input, which eventually will help the production of the second language. This is a really important concept. Listening material was not as important as before, but we're trying to go into a natural approach. We're trying to use the authentic materials, which makes really important for listening skill. Number three, speaking materials are necessary to let the students include his thoughts in the conversation. The student needs to know that he is important. The student needs to know that what he thinks is important, and he wants to make the world his world. So that's really something we need to do. Number four, speaking materials help the student become confident in their capacity to interact with native speakers and be part of the world community. In order for the students to be proficient, they need to be able to go out. They need to be able to interact in an autonomous way from the class. And for that, the speaking and listening are essential. Thank you.